to a fairly large degree anyway. So, as mentioned, I'm going to be running through color management, how to get your images correct, in particular, as I say, on print. I mean, this is the whole purpose of what we're talking about, is how to get your colors correct, basically, and how to get them right. And of course, what we want to be able to do is get into this WYSIWYG type of environment. Now, for those of you not familiar with the acronym, basically it's what you see is what you get. And of course, that's really what we want to be able to do in any photographic or video or graphic workflow. But in this instance, we're going to be looking at photography in particular. And this is the sort of scenario that we'd like. We'd like to be able to see an image, capture it, and when we capture it, take it into our retouch area there. And at all times, what we see when we're live, we want to be able to see on screen when we're retouching. And likewise, when we can actually print that out or send it to output. I mean, we're, as I say, focusing on print this evening, but basically that output could be anything from tablet computers to projectors to you know, a whole range of different computers nowadays and different devices, phones even. So what we'd like to be able to do is to be able to get that consistency throughout that workflow. But of course, certain things get in the way of that, and you know, part of that is perhaps paper. Now, obviously, we're joined by Permajet tonight, albeit Ian's possibly miming his part of the presentation at the moment. But basically, paper is one of those things that obviously, in any sort of output, conventionally in the photographic environment, people have wanted to see their images put on walls, put into magazines, put into newspapers. And, of course, paper is something that allows differences. It allows actual character to be given to images. So things like canvas stocks, things like matte stocks can give more sort of atmosphere to an image, especially if you're putting something on a wall. Or, for instance, if you are you know, going into a magazine, of course, there's different types of stock there. In fact, we're probably all familiar with the ideas of newspaper stock as well, and the fact that that infamously is compared with blotting paper in the way it can soak up ink, basically. But Permajet tonight are joining us in spirit, if not in body, because of course they're one of the UK's, and for that matter, growing international marketplaces, favourite paper manufacturers when it comes to different types of paper. You know, their range is absolutely massive nowadays. Potentially, you know, something that gives you so much choice, but then again, that of course gives you so much chance to differentiate yourself, to pick exactly the right medium for your images. But with that, of course, comes a little bit of, well, requirement for knowledge, because if you're looking at a gloss stock, for instance, you know, you're going to get that real sort of nice luster and shine to your images. May not be right for all your images. You know, maybe you want to have that canvas look and feel for something you're going to put on a wall, or maybe even just in sort of an album environment. Basically, great to have that ability to put the right image on the right stock as well. And of course, when it comes to you know, textured and fine art materials in particular, that's where that can make a subtle yet really large difference to your end result. But of course, with all of these, it has an effect on how our images appear. Because taking that example, you know, we mentioned about newspaper stock, where, you know, really not particularly good stock in that instance, that can affect obviously your image. It can make that soaking in of the ink, that bloating of the dark areas can make all your images seem overly dark, and can make them basically not as sharp as they were. Whereas the three different types of Permajet stock we've been looking at there are all, you know, giving great effect as far as adding that extra nuance into your imaging. But you still need to be able to get ahead of the game and make sure your images are appearing correctly on them. And that's where we come to an important part of our workflows in the photographic world that sometimes misses out, that sometimes we miss the boat on, basically. So going from that conventional shoot, retouch, and output scenario, I've extended the analogy here. I've added in the screen at the bottom, which is the screen, one screen where you're retouching, but over a period of time. So what we're trying to add to your workflow here is a process, a three-stage process. Firstly, we've got to consider, right, if our print or our output, you know, and that output could be as mentioned, just going out into a projector, for instance, but ultimately, some other form of screen or device. But ultimately, if we're talking print, that can play the largest part in changing the way we see our prints, our images rather. So what we need to do is add in that central stage down the bottom there. In this example, where we're getting a sort of a yellowy, parchmenty effect to our image, we need to be able to soft proof that. We need to be able to emulate that particular setup. And of course, if we can, in that instance, emulate that, then we can move on to the next stage, which is that adjustment stage. And that adjustment stage in this instance is to say, right, well, when we saw this image in this particular example, it was pretty much a grey tone. It was a grayscale image. It was black and white. We know from the soft proofing stage it's going to come out slightly yellowy. So therefore, in the adjustment stage, we need to adjust back to get that as near to the original image as possible. And then that will follow through into the print side of things to get the print, the final print, looking as much like that original as possible. Now, it may not ever be possible to get that final print as perfect, as identical to that original setup as possible. And that's down to things like the color spaces that are available through your printers in particular. Less to do with the paper in this case, or the stock in this case, more down to the color capabilities of your printer. But let's have a look at what we're talking about here. Let's see how we can do this. So we're going to pop out of here and we're going to have a look at the joys of Lightroom. So let's have a look at Lightroom first of all, because in Lightroom it's possibly the easiest scenario to be able to soft proof, because in the develop module down the bottom of the viewer window we can see there's a button marked soft proofing. Now, probably 80% of audiences that I present to, when I present to them and say, have you pressed this button? Nowadays 90% of the audience are actually using Lightroom, but only about probably 20% of the audience have actually hit the soft proofing button. This is the important stage. It's going to allow you to see how your images are going to appear. This is the soft proof part of that workflow we were just looking at. So if I click that soft proofing button, instantly you can see here, as it tells you up the top here, it's a proof preview. And if we look at the window over here under the histogram on the right-hand side, top right-hand side, where my cursor is now, you'll see it's already picking up a particular profile. Now, these profiles are little description files telling, in this case, Lightroom, how to emulate how this is going to be printed out. It's essentially Lightroom is seeing the profile, the color space that this particular combination of print, stock, or printer, stock, and ink. In this case, this is an Epson 3000 on Permajet's matte canvas stock. Basically, we've got this profile, we've got this description file, and we've been able to see here how it's actually going to appear in this window. So if I click the Y key in Lightroom, you can actually see a before and after, just to give that obvious change in the two conditions there. In fact, if we zoom in, we can then move around if we want to as well. We can see different areas before and after, see the effect that's happening to our images there. But essentially, we can see that there's a slight deadening of color here because it's emulating this matte effect. So obviously, in that scenario, what we need to do is basically check, okay, is this the right sort of stock we want to be going out on? Perhaps putting on a papyrus stock is going to be better for this particular image. Perhaps putting on a luster stock may work well in this case, because we know it's going to give it much more of a realistic, conventional photo style end result. However, what we do want to do is make sure that once we've done this soft proofing, if what we're seeing on the right-hand side of the image is not what we want to appear there, if we're happy with this slightly more turquoise effect on the left-hand side, looking slightly cold basically on the right-hand side, then this is where we go into our adjustment controls in Lightroom to adjust that back. So we can go in here, we can just increase the temperature perhaps to bring up that level. Of course, Lightroom, being a good little tool, actually instantly makes a proof copy, or gives you the opportunity to. So therefore, we'll create a proof copy. You'll see two versions there now down the bottom of the window. And what that's giving us is one copy that's corrected and one copy that isn't, basically, such that we can actually keep our original there and have our new image working as far as that's concerned. Of course, at this point we can turn off our soft proofing because we've already created that soft proof now. So we know we've done the job. We've got it looking as we want it to. And basically at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, we can hit the print button, off it goes to print. We'll have assigned the relevant profiles at the print end of things as well. Key thing here, make sure you're turning off color management in printer. Otherwise you're going to get a double effect, basically, as far as that color management is concerned. But hopefully this is giving you that opportunity to get your head around what we're doing here. If we go back into that original version where we had that adjustment set up there, let's just go back in and turn on that soft proofing again and redo that stage. So we're just going to increase that that temperature, that warmth, to bring some warmth back into our image, to bring it up level to what we saw originally. And we're going to make this the proof copy in this case, because what we want to do is save this as a preset. Because what we want to be able to do is apply this adjustment to any image that we're going to be working on, and more importantly, going to be outputting on this particular luster stock. In this case, actually, it's my HP B9180 printer. So therefore, let's click Create, and in our presets folder over here, we now see we've got a luster stock output correction, basically. And then, of course, we can choose any other selection of images here, and basically just go into the into our output environment and click on that output correction, and that will correct it for output, basically. So as far as soft proofing is concerned, if we click that on, we can see it's back to where we started, basically. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an understanding. I mean, it's probably a bit easier when we show soft proofing on more obvious output environments. But if you are going out to sRGB, then you can also, or going out to the internet, you can choose sRGB as that output device, which for most of us won't appear greatly different. But if you're working on something like an ISO display, for instance, you'll see a change between what you're seeing screen-wise there, if you've got it set up for doing Adobe RGB, because ISO monitors can manage that, and what you can see as far as the joys of working on, for instance, my Mac laptop Retina. In fact, let's have a quick look at what we're talking about here, because what we're talking about are color profiles, basically, and that's basically, you can find these, and this is where you'd need to drop them, in particular on the Macintosh, by looking at your library folder, going into color sync and going into profiles, and there we can see the profiles I've just been looking at here. So this is the one. If I extend that out, we can see that's a watercolor. There's the luster profile I've been looking at. You can see there it's about 808 kilobytes, very small, basically. There's some other profiles in here. There's one for my my Epson 3000 here, so a slightly bigger file. All of these, though, are viewable through, on the Mac, something called the Color Sync utility. So if you happen to be on the Mac, you can boot up something called the Color Sync utility. It's a utility built into the operating system. It's been there since at least OS 10.4. On the Windows, there's a downloadable plugin similar to this, which is called Color. And fortunately, there's also something built into Datacolor's Spyder software that allows you to do what I'm showing you now, which effectively is just to give you a little view of what a profile is. So this is the color space, or really the profile of Adobe RGB. So when you are working, for instance, in Adobe RGB in Photoshop, this is the amount of colors that you can work in or see. Now on its own, not a great deal of use, but if I hold that for comparison and overlay sRGB into that, you can instantly see the difference between sRGB and Adobe RGB. Basically, sRGB is the colored area there. Adobe RGB is the white mesh around the outside. So you can see that sRGB is a lot smaller color space. So straight away, we're getting the understanding that, okay, there's less colors in sRGB. So that may make you think, okay, it's not so good. Probably won't want to work in that. But the important thing you need to find out is, what can your display that you're looking at show you? So if I click down here, here's my my Retina display on my laptop I'm currently working on, and here's a calibration of that last week. So if you watch the color area on screen, when I click on the Retina display, you'll see a subtle change, a very small change. Basically, what you'll see is that color area, and effectively this is the profile of the screen, so the colors available via that screen that I'm working on, are considerably smaller than Adobe RGB. It's pretty much the same as sRGB. If I just click back to sRGB, you'll see a subtle difference there in the color space. And what that's telling us is, okay, if I want to be retouching on this particular machine using this screen, then I need to be working in sRGB. I need to set Lightroom, Photoshop, whatever other applications I'm working to retouch in to sRGB. Otherwise, I can't see the colors I'm working in. So if I worked in Adobe RGB, say, and I'm working on a landscape scene or something with a lot of light greens in, all this area up here, I could adjust because I can start moving controls in Lightroom or Photoshop, etc. But I can't actually see what's happening because my machine, my display, can't allow me to do that. And this is why, for instance, you spend money on better displays, things like ISOs, where you can actually see more than 90% of Adobe RGB. There you can see it's a much bigger color space, so that potentially explains why you should be working on better machines or better displays like ISOs if you want to be working in a true color managed environment. And likewise, things like the Cintiqs from Wacom. Now, obviously, they're renowned for being incredibly nice to use tablets with a screen that plug into your computers. So effectively, it's like working on digital paper when you're working on them. But actually, the 24 and now the 27 inch, which has just replaced that, have got a massive color space. So almost all of Adobe RGB again. So again, really worthwhile working in Adobe RGB if you've got something like a Cintiq. But of course, we're here to talk about print. And I've shown you a visual representation of print at the moment, but let's have a look at a less visual and more graphic version of what we've been talking about, because down here we've got a whole bunch of profiles that we've got available on our machine. And of course, that gives us the opportunity to show us the sort of thing we've been looking at already, basically. So for instance, let's have a look at that luster stock that I was showing you earlier on. You can see that actually that profile is pretty big. It's not bad compared to the Adobe RGB color space, but there are still areas, as mentioned, that you can't print with this particular luster stock on this HP printer. If I look at my R3000 there, so you can see again slightly different printer, capable of different color spaces, but again not as big in overall size as the rest of Adobe RGB. So this is why we need to be doing this soft proofing. It's why we need to use a good controlled environment for converting our images into the output environment we're looking at. And of course, if we look at some of the other flawed examples that you can have, these are actually very good profiles. But if we look at, for instance, newspaper print, we were looking at first of all, or talking about rather. So that's newspaper print there. That's the profile for newspaper print. You can see really, and this black cross at the bottom here is the shadow end of our color space, and the white cross is the highlight end. So we can see straight away with newspaper stock how much that fills in our ink. Basically, it blots up the ink. And of course, we can see that. Let's pop, in this instance, in the Photoshop. Let's actually go and view this particular image via the View menu. You go into the Proof Setup and choose a Custom Setup. And here we can choose different types of printers. So there's a Kodak photocopier that I've got at home for in my lab, actually, for currently being used to show us an output there. But let's have a look for our US newsprint. And in the background, you'll instantly see that darkening of that image. So let's just click out of here. If I hit the Command Y key, it'll toggle between the two. So you can see potentially some filling. Let's actually go and have a look at that again in Lightroom on an image that's going to show a bit more change there. So let's actually pop into US newsprint on this particular image. And you can see how instantly washed out. Obviously, it was the artistic image I was using on the other shot wasn't really showing that washed out effect because it was already got a washed out effect on there. But here you can see how that instantly that newsprint is affecting our image there, basically with that washed out newsprint look and feel. And of course, we quickly looked at that Kodak printer there. Now, this is only just a photocopier fax machine, but again here, washed out in a different way. We're really not getting any black detail in there. So if we look at the profile for that, then basically we can see straight away virtually no color capability on that. It's only got a chunk of midtone. So what we're saying to you here, folks, is basically get ahead of the game, have a look at the profiles when they're sent to you. And then, of course, this is the key thing we can be doing. How do we get these profiles? Well, of course, there's a range of different things we can do. We could get our various different types of paper and our printers, and basically we can go into into our printers and work with something like a SpyderPRINT. Now, the SpyderPRINT from Datacolor is a device specifically for working on on color profiling, basically. So effectively what it does, as you can see here on screen, is allows you to print out some test charts, and those test charts can then be read by the device. This is the SpyderPRINT here. It's actually a USB-based device. It comes with Mac or PC software, sits on your machine and allows you to read these test charts. And of course the idea here is you print out these test charts on every printer and every type of stock that you've got. And this allows you to basically fingerprint or produce that profile of your printer. It takes, I don't know, probably 10-15 minutes to do each printer, depending on what type of print charts you choose, because there's different levels, different more complex or easier level print charts, but the more complex ones, i.e. the ones with more colors, give you an even more accurate color profile. And of course the good thing here is you're getting an exact profile for your print and stock combination. So if you choose different types of ink, for instance, on a particular printer, you're going to get that nuance of third-party inks as opposed to manufacturer inks built into the profile here. And even things like the conditions on the day can be taken into account. But key thing here is it's giving you a real level of control. However, unless you are printing out your prints and selling them, or really needing them to be absolutely spot on accurate for competitions, for instance, then actually you don't really need to be doing this part of the scenario. Yes, you need to be soft proofing, yes, you need to be adjusting, but you can soft proof by using supplied profiles. And this is of course where our friends at Permajet have come in, basically, because much as they make a vast range of different high quality papers to give you that real sort of fantastic range of looks and feels with the same images, what they also do is offer a free profiling service. So essentially they take the onus off of you for having to create a profile of your paper, and in fact you can just go to their website and download those profiles. So therefore you can actually pop in and you can see some of the many printers that they've got listed here, and you can choose a range of different profiles for those particular printers as well. So depending on types of ink and media again, because obviously they multiply out the number of printers with the number of paper in particular that Permajet supply. So defaults available from their website. You can see the URL up the top left-hand corner there. But that's of course if you're printing yourself. Now people ask me, well, okay, what do I do if I'm working with an external print company, somebody like an album printer or a full-color printer? What do I do in that instance? Because I'm not necessarily going to be able to choose the printer and the output stock at that particular point. Well, you can do much the same thing, although it has to be said, compared to the range of profiles you get with Permajet, actually most print companies have only 2 or 3 because they're more limited on the actual types of stock and also on the types of printer they've got. But same thing applies if you're sending your images off to somewhere else to be printed rather than getting paper and printing them yourself. Then basically you can actually be downloading those profiles again, and basically you'll be able to get into the realms of soft proofing again. Key thing to mention about Permajet as well is if you're using their papers, you can also get them to do or create a profile for you, so bespoke to your printer and ink scenario. You can actually send off your print to them, your printout to them, and get that done. But if we get a chance to talk to Ian later on, we'll have more about that from him. But the big question, of course, is, all right, perhaps you're getting the gist of soft proofing here as far as the print end of things is concerned. What else do I need to do? Well, of course, it's one thing to soft proof, but what happens if we get to this nice situation where we've got that soft proofing going on and we're able to emulate what's coming at the back end there? What happens if our screens are causing an issue? So in this little scenario, what we're saying is, okay, we're capturing our image correctly. We're then taking it into a non-calibrated display. Because let's face facts, if you're going to be looking at your images on a display, you're going to be trusting those displays to say, all right, I'm going to soft proof my image and output it. If those displays aren't correct, aren't showing the true colors, then this is the sort of scenario you're going to have. Basically, the steps 3, 4, and 5 here are the same screen over a period of time. Again, what we're saying here, though, is as part of that soft proofing and adjustment phase, what we've done is we've looked at our screen, said in this case, well, it looks like it's got a bit of a green tint. And actually on our Cintiq there, it's actually got a bit of a blue tint. I'll tell you what, in this scenario, this example, we'll trust that the screen is correct as opposed to the Cintiq. just as a random choice. And of course, we'll then try and remove that green thing, because remember, we captured a fairly neutral image in the first place. So we'll get it back to step 5, retouch our image back to step 5, where actually we think it's looking correct. But of course, the nightmare situation has happened there, where you've removed green from your image. When you go to that step 6 and 7, the profile, the printed output, the correctly color managed output, and you output it, what you've just done is removed green from your image, and therefore it's going to come out looking red. Now, that's obviously a fairly trivial example of the sort of errors that can creep in, basically. But the key thing here is, if your screen isn't calibrated, you will then start wasting time trying to make it look the way you want it to look, and retouching and adjusting that image, and that potentially will muck up your image, will ruin your image, and of course waste your paper and your ink when it comes out the back end. And of course, this is an important part, because if you've gone to the trouble of downloading the profiles and you think you're doing the right thing, even if you've introduced in the soft proofing stage and adjustment stage after that, if it's not calibrated on screen, you've wasted your time. So we need to get you to this scenario where we can see, we can trust what we're seeing on screen is correct, and get back into that adjust or soft proof and adjust stage. So how do we do it? Well, there's a few things we need to take into account. Things like, for instance, the different types of screens we've got, and that's why we get these differences in some respects, but also we get differences in the way things appear just because screens age. My laptop I'm working on now is a replacement, because the laptop I had last year, basically over 6 months, lost a percentage of its color gamut per month. So therefore, not a great situation at all. It was something, fortunately, because I calibrate my screen the way we're about to tell you about, it meant I kept a track of my screen all through that 6-month period and could see how things were going off, basically. And so therefore, okay, that's what we're trying to address here, basically. And the question is, how do we do it? Well, the good thing is we have a calibration solution, and that's in the form of something called a Spyder5 now from Data Color. It's a device that can color manage in various different iterations all types of screen, pretty much, basically anything you can drive from a computer and that emits light. As long as we can run the software on the computer, then we can calibrate it, basically. So laptop screens and desktop screens, projectors, TVs, and 4K and 5K now as well have been introduced into the mix, basically. And the way it works, basically, you load up the Mac or PC software. It doesn't come on a disk anymore, so you download it when you actually get a Spyder5, and that way you're always up to date with the latest version of the software as well. And it comes with a nice little software wizard. You can see it on the right-hand side of the screen here. That's the area that tells you what to do, gives you a few hints and tips as well, and just runs you through very simple steps of software. Fundamentally, you're plugging in this Spyder device, which we'll show you in a second, and in front of the eye of the device, it's got sensors on it. The software runs a range of different color swatches, and at the end of that, it creates that profile of that screen and auto-activates the correction, if you like, the correction to make sure that that screen, whereas before the profile was saying, okay, it can see this, that, and the other color, it'll correct it to show ICC profiled colors. This is the International Color Consortium. It's the little international consortium set up between various different manufacturers like Microsoft, Apple, Adobe, etc., and it's the same standard that everybody works to. And once you've calibrated your screen, you've got two things. You've got the screen that's been calibrated with the Spyder, which is now going to show the same as anybody else with the same screen that's been calibrated. They will show the same colors for the same images. Also, it's going to give you that profile, so you can see what's going on with your monitor over time, basically, which is a very useful thing to be able to do, because you can therefore track if things are deteriorating with your images, basically. Now, those of you who perhaps have had a Spyder before can see perhaps some new and interesting changes with the actual build of the Spyder. The Data Color Spyder has now been revised in its 5th iteration, and with the version 5, we've got a new build to it. It's got a much more rounded shape, which actually gives you the ability to work on the new curved screens that we're getting through on TVs and other types of displays. It's been built to actually give you more control of color, because it's got a better set of optics. We'll come to that in a second. Hello. Sounds
Hello.
Ian
Hello.
might have arrived. Good grief. Hello, folks. So, Ian, are you there?
Sorry to gate crash.
That's all right. We'll forgive you. We're almost getting to the bit where we need you to talk about your papers as well, so that's good.
Fantastic.
If you bear with us in the background, and I'll just round up on my side of things here. But as we were saying to the audience there, basically, the new Spyder5 has got this capability of calibrating 4K and 5K screens, and part of that is down to this rebuild on the Spyder. Part of the rebuild has given us a new lens cap cover in there, and the whole build of the Spyder here is actually giving us the opportunity to work in a more mobile environment. Sorry, I was just turning Ian's speaker off there for a second, or microphone off there whilst I'm still talking. So the whole target of the Spyder5 is to give us this capability to work mobile. We've rebuilt the device, so now basically we've got a range of optics in there, encapsulated in a robust setup, basically, so it's more knock resistant, and you can just chuck it into your bag. That's where that lens cap comes in as well. It also acts as a counterbalance when we're actually calibrating with that. But the actual design of the optics and the baffle, the honeycomb area here over the optics has been redesigned as well. The Spyder 4 previously was the only device out there recommended to, in the Pro and the Elite format, to work with computers like the iMac. The iMac has a large glass front to it, which actually, because it's quite thick, causes a refraction, or stray light to bat around inside there and affect the readings. Well, we've taken that, what we learned there, in as much as we introduced a honeycomb effect on the front of the sensor there to focus the light in on the sensor. So it's sort of a grid, basically, that stops stray light coming in from the sides and cuts down on that the light we don't want to be calibrating there. And what we've done with the 5 is we've actually deepened and increased the mesh, the fineness of that mesh, basically the honeycomb effect, to make that focusing of light that much more accurate, which is great, because actually we're not only getting great results with iMacs still, but we're also getting better results now with some of the lower spec monitors out there and older displays as well. In fact, we're getting up to 55% improvement in calibration on older displays. So Spyder5 really giving us some superb new results there. And it's coming in 3 different formats, basically. So we've got the Express, the Pro, and the Elite, as we had previously. But now, effectively, they're all the same physical unit. The differences here being that the Express doesn't have the ambient light sensor turned on. The Pro does, and the Elite does. And the Elite, for instance, more aimed at professional laboratories and studios and graphic studios, has features like the Spyder Tune capability in there, so you can actually effectively tune in your different displays. So say you had two Mac displays and they weren't quite matching, you can actually push that calibration to get them to exactly match as far as that's concerned. Good thing about our friends from Permajet tonight is they've got some offers on. We've put together some bundles together with the joys of our friends at Permajet. And if I just turn Ian back on again as far as his speaker's concerned, you might want to talk to some of this perhaps, but or we might find that I give him a nice surprise that I've turned on his microphone and he doesn't realise it's happening. But basically, the Pro now yeah, there you are. The Pro now basically is our main unit used by professional and pro amateur photographers, and basically the offer tonight from Permajet, and we'll show you where to go to for those offers later on, is that their price on the Pro is £150 ink VAT, but includes a pack of oyster paper. So that's either I believe it's 100 sheets of A4 or 50 sheets of A3. Now similarly on the Elite, another offer there, £190, and there you are. There's the phone number to call in for these bundles, basically. So it's a special limited offer bundle on this. Do call the number on the line below there in blue if you would like to get any of these bundles, basically. So that's going to give you the chance to have some of their most popular paper there included in a bundle with a very good price on either a Pro or an Elite there. So Ian, what's the score with the oyster paper? What style of paper is that? Are we going to be covering that off later on?
Yeah, what we're going to do is the idea is that to call in for that one. It's not something we can do on the web, which makes it a little tricky, but do give us a call. We'll get that sorted. Oyster is our most popular award-winning semi-gloss finish, so it kind of covers everything that most photographers will want and like. Very, very extremely white base. When you start to look at it in terms of measurement value, it's going along sort of 64, 65 degrees Kelvin. So if you're looking back towards, how monitors work and how monitors look, so it's a very blue surface, but white to the in terms of natural light. So yeah, incredibly popular. It's the one where we have absolute confidence in terms of market-leading product, and we try to bundle it in to make it a little more attractive. But so the only caveat to it is you do have to give us a call to get that one. We will hopefully, I'm sure it appears later on in one of the slides, we have a promo code which is slightly different, but we'll add that one in a little bit later, which is to get some extra money off any Permajet paper type till the end of the month.
Oh, you might be catching me out now, Ian, because I think I might have forgotten to put the promo code in, so you might have to read us that out later on. Or
that's fine.
What we can do actually is we can send that out as a follow-up email tomorrow for those who've attended the webinar or for anybody else that registered for it. So we can actually pop that into there anyway. So, but we'll cover that off later on. But cheers, Ian. Thanks. That's given us a bit of background on that. I'll just mute you off again for the time being, whilst we just. I'll just finish off what we're running through here. So basically, lastly, I mean, the guys at Permajet are also stocking expresses as well at the moment at £95. So you've got the opportunity to order those, or as I say, phone the guys and have a chat with them about those great deals on, including the paper there as well. Now, before Ian comes in and shares a bit more about his range of papers, what I'm just going to quickly run over for you is one other element that you need to take into account, because what we don't want is for you to come away from tonight and think, well, I've got a total understanding of this and have missed out on one fairly large chunk of our workflow. And that's what happens at the front end, at the capture end, basically. Because what we've said so far is we can find out what your papers are going to, or what your output is going to look like by soft proofing, basically looking at the profiles that we've already shown you of output and emulating those on screen in things like Photoshop, Lightroom, Aperture, you name it, you can soft proof in there. Albeit, of course, Aperture doesn't exist anymore, but hey. But basically, it gives you that opportunity to do that soft proofing. And of course, we've said that in order to do that accurately, you need to have a calibrated screen. So calibrating the screen is the most important stage as far as being able to trust what you're seeing, because that's going to be your eyes. That's going to be the thing that's going to tell you what to adjust. However, it may be showing you colors correctly, but it may not be showing you the correct colors. i.e., when we go out and we shoot in the world of photography and we shoot in different lighting conditions, we get this sort of scenario where, classically in things like weddings and events, where you've got the same subjects, in this case maybe a bride and a groom, being shot in different lighting conditions. And of course we don't want this hodgepodge type effect. What we want is to get some nice consistency. So this is where we've got something called the Spyder checker. Now it's a nice large color shoot guide which allows you to get your colors correct at capture as well. So basically we're taking in the correct colors if we use a Spyder checker. Effectively what it allows you to do, because it's got, you see on the screen, it's a fold out guide that actually folds into sort of a relatively small, light, certainly, device which has got these two printed cards in, but it's protected. It's a nice encapsulated, solid device again. So again, ideal for working mobile, basically, which of course you're going to be wanting to take this out potentially to shoot on location. But basically, the idea here is when you shoot this one shot of this for every type of shooting, every type of lighting condition you've got, and that allows you to capture the lighting conditions, and therefore the software that comes with the Spyder checker creates a calibration, if you like, or a preset within things like Lightroom and Photoshop, Camera Raw, which allows you to adjust your images back to that original starting point. So essentially it will take out any imperfections due to the lighting conditions you're in. So in that example, for instance, we've gone from, on the left-hand side, we're obviously getting a bit of burnout there. We're getting the lighting in the studio, in this instance, causing some color imperfections. But because we know, or the software that comes with the Spyder Checker knows what every one of those color swatches on that 48 color swatch chart should be, it can correct for that. So again, enough of the slideshow. Let's actually just quickly show you this. Let's go back in here. We'll turn off our soft proofing now and go and find a photo shoot which I've been working on, or rather, to be honest, that's making me sound like a photographer, and I'm not a photographer in the least. As you can tell from these are my photos. Basically, this is one of my family's weddings, basically. So what I've done is, much as I'm a lousy photographer, I've gone along and at least used the opportunity to try and shoot the same guys in different lighting conditions. And you can see exactly to my point. We've got multiple lighting conditions. So in that rest of the workflow point of view, we've got 3 different types of color cast and 3 different types of color effect that are affecting our images here. Now I've got a calibrated screen, so I'm seeing them correctly, and I can adjust things in order to soft proof the back ends and correct them to how I want them to come out. But at the moment, I'm having to make a subjective guess as to, well, was this tunic, this coat, was it slightly orangey red, or was it white here? Was it very red? I mean, what are the questions? And I have to either use my memory to think, well, I vaguely recall that the groom was in a light pink shirt, but these two, no, it's definitely grey, this tunic that they were wearing. And of course, when it comes to the bride's dress and so on, you could really be in a little bit of a no-win situation if you are relying on guesswork and your memory to remember quite how you saw it. In particular, of course, if like me, you have one eye that sees slightly red and one eye that sees slightly yellow. So take the subjectivity out of it and say, okay, in each of these lighting conditions, let's shoot the color chart. Now, an important point to say about this is you saw that the Spyder Checker was quite big. Now, when we're shooting this sort of group scenes and so on, what we do want to make sure we're doing is not having a color chart, and there are others out there on the marketplace, which are essentially very small, aimed at the world of macro photography and product photography, and fine for that. But if you're wanting to do group scenes, of course, what we want to do is have our camera metering for the area we're shooting. So we can't pop in a little color guide and hope that that's going to help. What we want is to pop in something that's big enough that, okay, once we've shot our scenes, we're then going to be cropping down, not zooming in on camera, because that will mean that you're going to be shooting metering for just purely the chart as opposed to the actual area you're actually taking the photograph of. So here we've done exactly that. We've shot the chart in the full environs, and then we've cropped down afterwards in Lightroom. So great. We've then got our version of the Spyder Checker here. We then need to do 3 simple things. So we're going to quickly set our white balance to remove any overall color cast. We're then going to quickly go and just check our highlight and shadow readings, because by doing that we can check what our exposure and our contrast, our shadow and therefore our contrast are like. So we know this square here is a 96% white, and if we look at the histogram just underneath that, you'll see it's reading about 96% at the moment, which is great. It means that we've got the right exposure here. We haven't overexposed in this particular instance. But if we had, we'll just use the exposure slider to drop or increase exposure to get it to the right value there of 96. And likewise at the other end, we've got a blacks reading, which should be somewhere around 4%. Again, if we look at that, it's on average about 4, maybe a little bit low. Again, we would use the black slider to adjust the other end, the shadow end of our image there, just basically to get the contrast and the highlights right. Because what we're trying to do here is make sure we have got a 96 dot where we want it, because if we overexpose, for instance, at the highlight end, we'll be losing information in our images. We're burning out the highlights. And similarly on the shadow end, more critically, I suppose, where we'll be affecting the black point and the contrast, but also we may be wasting ink as well if we're underexposing the black end. But once we check those, we got that correct, we can just hand it over to the software at this point, because we've got a little plug-in for Lightroom, Photoshop, Camera Raw, etc., which is the Spyder Checker app. Comes with the Spyder Checker, comes with the chart, and basically that gives us the opportunity to pop open a little app here, and it's going to open up that image in the background there, and that's there. The application window there, you'll see the image of the cropped guide there is in the background. I'm just waving around in front of that the sample points, because all we need to do now is just to make sure we've got a sample point over every square, because we have to read all these colors, compare what they are appearing like in camera, or in Lightroom in this instance, with what they were when before. We know what those values are, because we know what it comes with the Spyder checker. It knows what the Spyder checker swatches should be. So we're just going to do a quick before and after contrast check, and we're doing that just purely by putting one of those squares in the center of each of those squares on the cropped image, and then the little square will read the light readings, the color readings of the square behind it. And in this case, I'm going to save that into Lightroom, and I'm going to give it a colorimetric. You can give it a little nuance, so neutral, basically colorimetric bias in this instance. And just by hitting Save Calibration, I can then create my calibration and pop that into our workflow. In fact, we used that before, but it doesn't matter, because basically what we'll end up with is a calibration over here in Lightroom, which we can then click on, and that will then update the look and feel of that image to correct those colors. More importantly, let's show you in the actual photo shoot here. So what we've got in this preset setup in Lightroom here, we've actually grouped all these presets together, so we can export them in one block if we wanted to with our images. But basically we can now click on our outside church preset and to correct our colors for there. So we can now see, yeah, they're gray shirts on these guys, skin tones looking much more natural. Go into the church there and apply the relevant inside the church preset to that. So let's apply that. Again, correcting out that sort of very orangey bias we were getting, or tint we were getting there. And again, not just changing the white balance, but correcting the entire color spectrum here. So getting all the colors right, 48 lookup points, getting that right. And of course, lastly, in the reception, we can then click on the inside reception correction, and again, getting those reception shots correct. Still can't get the guy on the right's eyes open, but hey, that's what Photoshop's more for, so we can go into that later on perhaps and do a bit of photo merging there. In fact, you can now, of course, do photo merging in Lightroom as well, one of those great new features. But that's it, folks. That's given you, I hope, a little bit of soup to nuts on how to get things right. I'll just point out to you that the Spyder checker actually comes, you can see it in its folded collapse form down the bottom there. It comes with a tripod mount. One of the key things about this guide, so you can actually tripod mount it, as you can see in the picture on the left-hand side. The cards in there are actually replaceable, so you also get a little fade checker built into the device that tells you if the cards are faded and if it's time to change them. But you've got two separate cards which do have grey cards on the back of them as well, basically, so multi-purpose device there. Most importantly is it's folded shut, really robust as well, so no issues like you get with conventional grey cards where they can get folded, creased and mucked up and therefore lose their values after the first week. In fact, a perfect partner for the cube, which you can just see down in the bottom right-hand corner there. But that's the capture end of things. We're now going to open up our microphone with Ian, so I'll just make sure I'm turning on the right microphone, which I... no, let's just... There we go, let's unmute Ian. So hello, Ian.
Hello, mate.
Hello, mate. Hi. So I think at this point we'll hand over to you and go into the drawers. Oh, reminding people that you guys also stock the Spyder checker there at £95 at the moment, I gather, as part of this bundle side of things. Or no paper bundle with that, but there are benefits to buying through yourself, which we'll come to a bit later on once we've covered over some of your papers. But if I hand over to you, Ian, as I say, you've obviously got a wide range of papers, and part of the purpose of tonight was to give you the opportunity to tell people about some of the differences, some of the nuances that you can get out of some of the papers there. So take it away, Ian.
Thank you very much. Our range has sometimes been criticised for being overly big, but there is a rationale behind that. As photographers get more and more creative, they are pushing the boundaries of what's demanded from a professional printer, a professional paper. So we have to ensure that we cover or give you an opportunity to print on a paper that suits your image the most, makes the most of it, or makes it stand out to the greatest degree. So in essence, the size of the range is effectively your fault, but we'll do our best to try and keep up with you guys, giving you something that you need. And so if we could move on to next slide, that'd be brilliant. Here it comes through. There we go. we break them down into test packs. It makes it a little easier. It makes it easier for you, so you can work out what kind of papers you're either most interested in, or maybe what most suit your work. Test pack number 1 is the everyday product range. Realistically, it's in terms of value for money, you tend to get more in the box, which is always good. And most of the papers in there are a very white-based surface, but they're surfaces you tend to recognise. So you'll see semi-glosses and lustres and gloss and matte papers in a kind of mid and lighter weight. There is a slightly quirky alternative in there called titanium, which a lot of people do like, have tried, and I've been really impressed with. It's a silver-based product, and so especially on monochromes, it really does make a change on an image. It can make it stand out and feel completely different to what you expected it from its original. So I'd recommend everybody at least give that a go. It's not something you might use on every single image that you do. If you're a monochrome photographer, I bet you would. So the test pack number 1 it's a good starting point. If anyone who's not sure about inkjet printing, they're just getting into it, they want to move from another manufacturer, then test pack number 1 is perfect. It'll get you started, and get you started in the best way. So if we could go on to the next slide.
Sure. Just to add in a question here. So how many sheets do you get of any particular type of paper in the test packs?
They do vary. The principle we take behind the test pack is we want you to be able to create a custom profile and do a custom profiled print. So for any pack there'll be at least 2 sheets. Sometimes there might only be 2. On things like test pack 1 there are considerably more than that. So they do vary from pack to pack, and then also from paper to paper. But we will definitely give you at least 2 at any one time, because we're nice like that. But we want to make sure that you're at least getting the best opportunity to test the paper in its true form, how you would want to see it. You can then make the decision for yourself as to how many different boxes you'd love to buy or invest in. So.
Cool. And the idea of test packs basically is, I presume you can buy, for instance, if you wanted to FB gloss warm tone as just a pack of that, yes. But this is giving you something that is a sort of a mix up, an assortment pack, basically. You can try different things.
That's exactly right. It's well, I guess as the name suggests, it's a test pack. It's a trial. It's how people get started. And I did a talk a couple of weeks ago, and 2 guys between them, they bought one of each test pack because they wanted to. They were starting out, they were starting new, they didn't know, so they just wanted to give everything a go, which is fine. That's great. That's a very broad way of doing it, or maybe a little bit scattergun. But if you don't know, it's the perfect way to find out.
Absolutely.
And in each test pack there is a little A7 swatch as well, so that at least gives you a reference point for every other paper that we do, so you can know where that would be. If you look at another test pack, you can get an idea of what papers are going to be in there without buying it to begin with, but once you then obviously buy into it, you can try them out on your own printer. If we look at test pack 2, we've got the Burrito range. Now Burritos traditionally, as probably the text will say on screen, I'm sure, will be from a darkroom user. Anyone who, when 99, 2000, when Permajet was kind of born or created out of Nova Darkroom, it's when people were moving out of darkrooms wanting a digital product which gave them the same feel that they were expecting. So you've got a barium sulfate coated product here which gives you that texture within the paper, but the surface is actually quite smooth. The majority of these are either neutral or warm bases. There is a bit of a caveat to that. We do have a product in there called Distinction, which is a very white base, which flies in the face of what you traditionally expect from this type of paper. However, it was born out of demand. People wanted a very stark white to go against their black and white images, to give them that stark contrast between rich deep blacks and crisp whites. So what you will find in this range is all of the papers have a high Dmax. Now, Dmax is a term which you may have seen bandied around. Is effectively the visible area in black until it becomes invisible to what you can differentiate between. So for subtleties in terms of tonal range, in shadows and then highlight areas, it's absolutely fantastic. It's what you'd want from this style of paper.
Cool.
So yeah, if we can go on to the next one, that'd be great. Now, test pack number 3 is if you were to tip all these out on the table, I would forgive people for not being able to work out which one's which or put them back in the right order initially. Once you get to grips with them, it's a little easier, but the subtlety of variance between them is very subtle, and each one has its own demand in different parts of the industry, so it's been born out of demand. It does have a purpose. And I would say that where the subtleties can change or improve an image just a fraction, but sometimes just enough to give it that extra life that you're looking for. So they're all cotton rag papers, so they're effectively made out of cotton linters, soaked and then crushed and rolled and coated, but not quite that simple. Obviously, I'm sure we'd all be doing it, but it just gives you, say, that subtlety and texture within the surface, but still giving you a nice, smooth, even finish. They're all matte papers. I will just make that point. Everything in Test Pack 3 and Test Pack 4 are matte finish. There is a paper in Test Pack 3 which is incredibly popular and a lot of people like and may not necessarily have heard of before, called Smooth Art Silk. It's a little bit different, which is why people really like it. It's a silky finish on the printed areas only, so it appears to be a matte. When you begin to print on it, you'll see in the printed area only you'll get a nice silk finish, which just gives a little lift, something a little different that you might not be expecting. And we have people who are quite amazed by it, is maybe a bit of a strong word, but I think they feel that they probably are. It can change an image dramatically for the better rather than for the worse. You'll see the term giclée, I think, in the description there. Giclée, again, is a term that is often bandied around. It does have a relevance in, obviously, the print industry. It effectively means sprayed, and so it's referring to printers which are over, I believe it's over 8 colours. I want to say 9, but I think it's over 8 different colours available within the printer, then going on to a pH-neutral paper, so a fine art paper. This gives you the ability to, the image in effect has more worth, especially if you're selling it, and it just gives an extra added element to a product which is already obviously doing a good job of representing your photography successfully. So I realise I'm rambling on a little bit here, so I do apologise. I'll scoot past this one as quick as possible. Test Pack 4 is exactly as the name suggests, it's the textured fine art range. So it's the smallest range, only 4 products in here, but they're going to give you that feel and of a textured, maybe watercolour paper, depending on what stock you're used to working on. Whether you're a traditional artist, you'll quite appreciate a lot of the images in, a lot of the papers in this pack, but they just give you the ability to change something, give it something, give it a bit of a life that maybe it was lacking before. And don't just think you have to be able to touch a paper to realise it's textured. You can see it even in a framed image behind glass. You can see the way the light diffracts off the bits of the paper, that it has a texture to it. So hopefully that makes sense. And I think we have one more slide.
Where's the canvas? Canvas.
Now, I won't harp on too much about canvas. Canvas in majority is where we supply into in the supply chain with a lot of professional print outfits. So anyone who's got a roll printer generally benefits from the practicality of it being on a roll. However, we do supply an A3 Plus cut sheet, and that's what Test Pack 5 is. It's all in A3 Plus cut sheets. You don't have to have the tools and all the ability to necessarily wrap a canvas around stretcher bars and such like. You can simply mount it onto a board. A lot of people do that because they like the style and the feel of that the canvas gives. We only produce higher quality canvas. Now, I'm sure every manufacturer will tell you that, but there are only 2 major products that are in a canvas, and that's polyester and cotton. And we are towards the higher cotton percentage end of the market because that is the more professional, that's the higher quality end of it. So you will see our canvases. They may appear a little expensive from time to time, but they give you the quality and that people are looking for. Especially when you obviously print a large canvas and you do have the ability to wrap it, or you get it wrapped, it can just make an image appear just stunning, really, more than anything else. But if you are going to mount it on a board, perfectly valid way of doing it. Just be aware of the type of board you're going to adhere it to, the adhesive you use to put it on the board, etc., etc., because they do have a degrading factor on the canvases if you don't use the right type of board, the right type of adhesive. Look for things which are pH neutral.
Cool. So
hopefully that's giving you a bit of a whistle-stop tour there.
Yeah, I do. I mean, you've also got a lot of new products out there as well, which we've obviously got some details of there. Probably the best thing to do is to point the audience towards your website, isn't it? And of course, one of the other offers, because not only are you offering you've got the bundles of paper with the spiders that are available from yourselves, as per the phone number earlier on. But also, if you go to the website, you've obviously got prices on all the test packs there and the individual range of papers that you do. But you've got this great offer in. So if you buy a Spyder checker or a Spyder5 from yourselves, you're offering a discount.
Basically, by any Spyder checker or monitor calibration device, ignore the fact that it says valid until the end of the 20th of the 5th, which is tomorrow. We're going to hold this open till the end of the month. But yeah, anyone who wants to buy a device, which we should hopefully be very competitively priced on anyway, can, by quoting a code which I will give you audibly, so we'll mail this out anyway, is DC for data color, 20MAY for May. So just to go over that again, DC 20MAY. When you buy a Spyder product on our website, if you then input that code against some paper, you will get 20% off. So an extra little saving which we can offer for you guys. If you get stuck with anything in terms of discount, give us a call, ask for me. As you already know, my name's Ian, and I'll sort it out for you to make sure that you get the best possible price and hopefully a little bit of discount as well.
Cool. And you've got all your contact details on, or contact numbers for the company on the website there as well, haven't you? So, yeah, any questions on different types of stock and advice on what would work well in particular circumstances, I'm sure you'd be happy to give them. So cool, thanks, Ian. That's great. I'll just wrap it up from my end of things. Now we're just running over a little bit over. So just to remind the folks out there, if you're not aware, we've talked about a lot of color management tonight. Look here, 90 plus pages of